In 62 seconds, one yes or no question destroyed FBI Director Kash Patel's career. Senator Chuck Grassley didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply asked, "Director Patel, did Deputy Director Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination?" What followed was the most damning confession in congressional hearing history. An FBI director admitting under oath that he granted his own deputy access to America's most classified intelligence, despite failing the security screening every other agent must pass. The same deputy who spent years calling FBI agents deep state thugs on his podcast. The same deputy who now reads the president's daily brief. December 11th, 2025, Senate Judiciary Committee. The moment Patel realized he'd been caught protecting someone who should never have touched classified material, Grassley had him trapped, and everyone watching knew it. December 11th, 2025, 2:34 p.m., Hart Senate Office Building, Room 216. FBI Director Kash Patel sat at the witness table in a pressed Navy suit, FBI badge gleaming under television lights, expression carefully controlled. He'd survived 3 brutal hours of questioning about border enforcement, counterterrorism, budget allocations. Republican members praised his leadership. Democratic members probed controversial decisions. But no one had yet mentioned the scandal that would define his legacy. Senator Chuck Grassley sat across from him, the Iowa Republican who'd spent 40 years in the Senate mastering the art of devastating simplicity. What Patel didn't realize was that Grassley had spent 6 weeks building a trap so perfect, so airtight, that no deflection could escape it. At exactly 2:34 p.m., Grassley recognized himself for questioning. The chamber fell silent. Political reporters leaned forward. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in. Everyone sensed something significant was coming. "Director Patel," Grassley began, his Iowa accent carrying that particular Midwestern precision that makes every word sound like a land deed. "I want to ask you about FBI security protocols, specifically polygraph examinations for senior officials with access to classified intelligence." The opening was procedural, almost boring, but trained observers noticed Patel's micro-expression shift. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. His hands, calm throughout 3 hours of testimony, suddenly gripped the table edges with white-knuckled intensity. "Senator," Patel replied carefully, voice steady but lacking confidence, "the FBI maintains robust security screening processes for all personnel with sensitive information access. Our protocols meet or exceed intelligence community standards." It was perfectly calibrated evasion, bureaucratic deflection that creates plausible deniability while technically avoiding a direct lie. It was also exactly what Grassley had anticipated. "Director Patel," Grassley continued, opening a folder with theatrical precision, "let me ask something very specific about those robust protocols." He held up a document bearing official FBI letterhead. Classification markings, confidential, law enforcement sensitive, were clearly visible. How many senior FBI officials have received waivers exempting them from standard polygraph examination requirements during your tenure as director? The question hung like a guillotine blade. Patel's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. Around the chamber, senators and staffers froze, recognizing something extraordinary. "Senator," Patel stammered, composure fracturing, "waiver decisions are made case by case in consultation with security personnel and are standard administrative." "Yes or no, Director?" Grassley interrupted, voice sharpening. "Have you granted polygraph waivers to senior officials in your administration?" Patel took a breath, attempting to regain control. "In rare circumstances, when security personnel determine that an individual's background and experience provides sufficient basis for confidence, I'll take that as a yes," Grassley said flatly. He pulled out another document, thicker, more detailed. "Let me help you with specifics, Director. According to 4 people familiar with FBI security protocols who spoke with ProPublica, You've granted polygraph waivers to 3 senior officials: Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Congressional Liaison Marshall Yates, and your personal assistant, Nicole Rucker. Is that correct? The impact was immediate and devastating. Patel's face flushed from pale to crimson in 3 seconds. His mouth opened, but no words came out, only a barely audible gasp the sensitive microphones picked up and transmitted to millions. Grassley had just named names, citing a ProPublica investigation Patel hoped would remain buried. But more importantly, he'd named Dan Bongino, the former Secret Service agent turned conservative podcaster turned FBI deputy director. Trump's personal choice. Someone who'd spent years calling FBI agents thugs and deep state operatives before being given the second highest position in the Bureau. Senator, Patel finally managed, voice trembling, personnel matters and security clearance decisions are confidential and cannot be discussed in open session without compromising. Director Patel, Grassley's voice rose with controlled fury. These aren't just personnel matters. These are security protocols in place for 40 years. Protocols designed to ensure people with access to the president's daily brief, CIA operations, NSA intercepts can be trusted with America's most sensitive secrets. And you waived them for your deputy director. The accusation hung with devastating clarity. Everyone understood what had been exposed. The FBI director exempted his own deputy from security screening every other employee must pass. But Grassley wasn't finished. He was about to spring the part that would destroy Patel's career in exactly 62 seconds. Director Patel, Grassley said, voice carrying absolute authority, let me ask about something else ProPublica reported. Something that'll help this committee understand the double standard you've created inside the FBI. He pulled out another document containing what appeared to be internal FBI communications. Classification stamps were clearly visible. At the same time you were granting polygraph waivers to your inner circle, you were ordering mass polygraph examinations for dozens of FBI agents. Not routine security screenings, Director. Loyalty tests. Tests where agents were asked a very specific question. Grassley paused, letting tension build. The chamber was absolutely silent. Have you ever said anything negative about Director Kash Patel? The revelation exploded through the room. Democratic members gasped audibly. Republican members looked at each other in genuine shock. Reporters frantically typed. Patel sat frozen, face completely drained of color. That's the question, Director, Grassley continued, voice ice cold with prosecutorial precision. Dozens of career FBI agents, people who've served this country for decades, investigated terrorism, dismantled criminal networks, risked their lives in the field. You subjected them to polygraph examinations to determine whether they'd criticized you personally while simultaneously exempting your own deputy director from any polygraph examination at all. The hypocrisy was so stark, so undeniable, that even Patel's Republican defenders fell silent. This wasn't partisan politics. This was institutional corruption exposed in real time. At 2:36 p.m., exactly 2 minutes into his questioning, Grassley deployed the trap that would force Patel's confession in precisely 62 seconds. Director Patel, Grassley said, leaning forward with the intensity of a prosecutor springing a perfect trap, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now to clarify something for the American people. He held up a document, turning it so cameras could capture the FBI seal and classification markings. This is an internal memorandum from FBI Chief Security Officer dated November 3, 2025. Subject line, Polygraph examination results for senior personnel. It documents that Deputy Director Dan Bongino received what the memo calls a disqualifying alert on his initial polygraph examination. The room went completely silent. A disqualifying alert was FBI terminology for failing a polygraph, showing deception on critical questions about foreign contacts, criminal activity, or security risks. According to this memo, Grassley continued, voice carrying devastating precision, Bongino's polygraph results indicated deception on multiple questions related to unauthorized contacts with foreign nationals and undisclosed financial relationships. The examining polygrapher recommended immediate termination of the security clearance process and removal from consideration for any position requiring classified information access. Patel's hands trembled visibly on the witness table. His lawyers frantically passed notes, but he seemed unable to focus. He looked like a man who just realized he'd walked into a trap with no escape. But instead of following that recommendation, Grassley said, voice rising slightly, you granted Dan Bongino a waiver. You personally signed a document exempting him from the polygraph requirement, and you gave him access to the President's daily brief, CIA operations, NSA intercepts, every single piece of classified intelligence that crosses your desk, despite the fact that he showed deception on questions about foreign contacts and financial relationships. The accusation was so damning, so specific, that Patel's entire defense strategy collapsed in real time. There was no way to spin this, no bureaucratic language that could explain away giving security clearance to someone who'd failed the examination designed to prevent exactly this kind of security risk. Director Patel, Grassley said, voice now carrying the weight of institutional betrayal, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question, and I want you to think very carefully before answering, because your response will be under oath and will be part of the permanent congressional record. The chamber held its collective breath. Did Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination? Yes or no? For 3 seconds, timed later by journalists reviewing footage, Kash Patel sat in absolute silence. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked at his lawyers, but they had no answer for a simple binary question. He looked at Republican committee members, but even they avoided eye contact, understanding this question had no good answer. At 2:37 p.m., exactly 62 seconds after Grassley had begun his trap, Kash Patel made the confession that would end his career. I do not have personal knowledge of the specific polygraph results, Patel stammered, voice barely above a whisper. But the waiver was granted based on Deputy Director Bongino's extensive background in federal law enforcement. Director, Grassley interrupted, voice like a hammer. That's not what I asked. I asked a yes or no question. Did Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination? Patel took a shuddering breath. His face was covered in visible sweat under television lights. His hands gripped the table so tightly his knuckles had turned completely white. Based on the information available to me at the time, the polygraph results were inconclusive and Director Patel, Grassley's voice thundered through the chamber. Stop evading. Did he pass or did he fail? At 2:37 p.m. and 38 seconds, Kash Patel said the words that would destroy him. The polygraph examination indicated some areas of concern that warranted further review, but he failed, Grassley stated flatly, not as a question, but as documented fact. Dan Bongino failed his FBI polygraph examination, showed deception on critical security questions, and you gave him a waiver anyway. You gave him access to America's most classified intelligence, despite the fact that he couldn't pass the security screening every other FBI employee is required to pass. Yes or no, Director, is that what happened? For exactly 5 seconds, Kash Patel said nothing. The silence was absolute. And then, in a voice so quiet the chamber microphones barely picked it up, he said the word that would define his legacy. Yes. The chamber exploded. Democratic members jumped to their feet. Republicans looked at each other in genuine shock, recognizing their FBI director had just confessed to one of the most serious security breaches in modern FBI history. Reporters frantically filed breaking news alerts. The press gallery erupted into chaos. Within minutes, hashtag Patel admits it was trending worldwide. CNN broke into programming. FBI Director admits deputy never passed polygraph. Fox News led with Patel confession rocks Senate hearing. Even conservative commentator Ben Shapiro tweeted, "This is indefensible. You can't give security clearance to someone who failed the polygraph while testing your own agents for loyalty." Within 48 hours, 3 investigations opened. DOJ Inspector General, Senate Intelligence Committee, House Oversight, all focused on the same question. What classified intelligence had Dan Bongino accessed while possessing a security clearance he should never have been granted? Within 72 hours, Bongino announced he was stepping down as deputy director, effective immediately. In 62 seconds, Chuck Grassley proved that even the FBI director couldn't escape basic logic. Either Bongino passed his polygraph or he didn't. And when Patel finally admitted the truth, yes, Bongino had failed. Yes, he'd been given a waiver anyway. Yes, he'd accessed classified intelligence despite showing deception. The double standard was exposed for every American to see. The polygraph tests weren't about security, they were about loyalty. And in Patel's FBI, loyalty to Trump was the only security clearance that mattered.